to talk to you about teaching and teachers. And I probably will get round to the subject of why I left teaching, because it looks like this article is going to answer a few of those questions. Now, where was I? Yes, this was an article in the Telegraph from a week ago. So, well, a week from making this video. It might be several months before you get round to it. But it's a shame because they mentioned something on the television that's coming up on the television, and it's probably out of date now. But you can look up about Catherine Birbalsingh on the internet, and wherever you are in the world, if you have any respect for education, you will like hearing about Miss Birbalsingh. Now, it goes like this. It says here that do watch Britain's strictest headmistress on ITV, especially if you're a teacher. It will cheer you up. Well, it'll cheer some of us up. It would have cheered me up. But I'm quite sure there are many teachers in the system right now that it would shock, appall and disgust. And that's the problem. You see, the problem is, I suppose, the teachers' training colleges, which fill young recruits' heads with all sorts of nonsense about children enjoying themselves. Now, it's true that children learn better when they're enjoying themselves. That's for sure. Whenever I had somebody tell me a child was lazy, I would always react by either saying or just thinking, no, there's no such thing as a lazy child. There is such a thing, though, as a child who has either some sort of educational problem, like dyslexia, that's not been diagnosed, or the child is just not engaged. Whatever you're doing, you're not doing it right for that kid. And so, yes, a child learns better when that child is engaged. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're enjoying themselves. I mean, kids enjoy themselves squelching red paint over their hands and their face. And that's probably not what you want to be doing in an English lesson. So, but when children really do enjoy themselves is when they have rules and boundaries. It's all very well saying, you know, kids have to be free and all, and there is a limit to how much you should be constraining a child. Obviously. You see, whatever I say, you're going to get some people saying, well, you should have, you're thinking of, what do you want to do? Wrap the child up in gaffer tape and keep it quiet that way? No. But there are limits to how free a child can be before that child starts feeling uncomfortable. Now, that child may not say to you, I'm too free here, I'm not comfortable. But they will show you in ways like bad behaviour or uncontrolled outbursts of some sort. When a child knows there are limits, that child feels safe. I keep on bringing similes from the animal world. Well, I'm not saying children are animals, but I am talking about mammals. And all mammals have similar construction. No, I'm not going to say that. There are some things that I see horses doing in the way of general behaviour, which are so human if you look at how they are behaving with each other. And the one thing, now horses are an extreme because horses know that they're lunch to almost anything. So they are more frightened. But I'll just show you how frightened a horse is. Imagine that you are wearing a lot of gold jewellery and you are walking through town, a bad part of town, on your own with all this jewellery clanking on your arms and, you know, sort of gold watch and bracelets all jangling, and it's dark and there are some shadows in the alleys as you're walking along and you're on your own. You'd feel nervous, wouldn't you? Well, a horse feels like that all the time, unless there are certain things around that horse to protect it. And why does it feel like that? Because the horse knows that its very body is as valuable to a tiger as gold bracelets are to some mugger. And that the mugger is like, that the tiger is likely not to just ask for a quick nibble, but will end that horse's life. So that's an example of how the unguarded mammal feels usually, unless it's a predator. Now, children are very much unguarded mammals. Look, I'm just throwing this around now. It's not my general attitude to children. So don't think I'm saying children are like horses and you've got to treat them like horses. But when my horse is in a field on its own, it will not sleep. It will sleep if there's another horse. When horses are together, you can never leave a horse in a field, or you should never leave a horse in a field on its own. You should at least have two. And when there are two, one will lie down and the other will stand guard, and then they'll swap. That's the way horses keep feeling safe. But when my horse is in the stall on his own, he'll lie down and go to sleep. That's because he knows there's a box round him and he feels safe. And that's how children feel. It's not like they don't want to be free. And if they can get out for a while and run wild and paddle in a forbidden stream and all the rest of it, they will do that. And not too much of that is good. But the child needs to feel the walls of that box around him or her to feel safe. And that box can be almost anything. It's just the structure of their lives. So in a school, a child should know that these are the limits, these are the rules. You can feel safe here because you know there's an end to everything you're doing, and so you can get on with your work. And basically that's what Ms. Birbalsingh is doing when she has a school which has very strict rules, and the children know when they go into that school there are walls around them, psychological walls that keep them safe, and they can concentrate on learning. And there are many schools where there are no rules. There are kids run around and kids bully each other. So when they're running around and pushing each other and horsing about, that was totally unplanned. When they're doing that, they don't feel safe. They might not feel too bad. They might not say they feel unsafe, although some kids that get bullied feel very unsafe. But they know the edges of their universe are not so perceptible, not so defined. And I really believe this. And when I was teaching, I had strict rules in my class. And they weren't strict rules about shut up and put your nose down in your book. No, but there were strict rules about behaviour. And the kids knew that. And I want to tell you, when I was teaching, my classes always got, on average, higher results than the other classes. So I knew I was right, but I didn't have the strength of will or purpose that Catherine Birbalsingh has. And I knew that, and I did that in my class. But I gave up teaching because I had this feeling that I was not fashionable, that I was a bit of a dinosaur. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I called myself Graniopteryx, you know, dinosaur bird, an old bird. Anyway, but so I felt like I was out of step with everybody else, and I went into other things. I'm not complaining, but Birbalsingh she realised she was right and she went for it in a way. I don't think I would have had the strength or the courage. Well, I know I didn't have the courage because I didn't do it. Anyway, so I'm just going to tell you a bit about Catherine Birbalsingh in case you haven't heard of her. Did not start out as a traditionalist. At Oxford, she joined the Socialist Workers' Party. When she began her teaching career, she went in with all the usual assumptions. Schools were underfunded. The biggest obstacle facing non-white kids was structural racism. She'd learnt all this in college, you see. But she found that her classroom experiences could not sustain those preconceptions. So this is somebody who had been taught one thing, went into a situation with this one thing in her mind, and then had the intelligence and moral courage to realise that she'd been fed a bill of goods. Or sold a bill of goods, isn't it? That's what you say. And she changed her mind. Now, I actually never took on that bill of goods. I went in without these preconceptions. The real problem, she came to realise, lay in the attitude of the people who oversaw our schools. Instead of imparting knowledge, teachers were overseeing child-led discussions. Instead of promoting confidence, they were encouraging victimhood. That's the worst thing you can do. Just the worst thing you can do to a child. Instead of upholding the canon, I suppose like Pride and Prejudice in Shakespeare, they were seeking out obscure texts on grounds of identity politics. Some obscure poet from somewhere. Instead of expecting high standards, they were indulging pupils from underprivileged backgrounds and thus unintentionally condemning them. Yep, that's quite right. I saw other teachers saying, I got very annoyed about one kid that was acting badly, and I got other teachers saying, he comes from a broken family, he's in trouble. No, this was one of the situations where I thought, I'm really out of step here. There's something wrong with me. I said, no, he's in school. He should behave accordingly. If he can't behave accordingly, then he has to be given special help in some way to guide him. But he can't. He was beating somebody up. He can't do that. He's from a broken... there was nothing I could do. So, I left. Not after that incident, but after several incidents like that. Birbalsingh didn't leave, it says here. She began to dream of a different kind of school, a school with houses. When you divide a school into houses, you get some sort of friendly rivalry, or sometimes not so friendly. Uniforms and disciplines and classics. Now, this was before J.K. Rowling came up with Hogwarts, by the way. But both of them had a similar idea. And although Rowling was very much in the Labour camp and donated a lot of money to Labour before she discovered she wasn't politically correct enough for them, she had all these ideas, but at the back of her mind, she realised that all these wild ideas about child-led discussions and all the rest of it, they were all wrong. And when she invented her school, she invented Birbalsingh's school. But after Birbalsingh had done it. So uniforms, discipline and classics. Look, I hated doing Latin at school. I loathed Latin and I hated grammar as well. But my goodness me, is it useful now. I was in Portugal a few, before lockdown, and I was staying with friends, and we were in a supermarket, and I'm allergic to stuff, and one of them is I've got to watch out with wheat. So I was looking at these packets of food, reading the ingredients. And I was working out what they were mostly from my knowledge of Latin, because Portuguese is a Latinate language, and stuff like wheat came up as almost the same word. So my friend, as she came back, she saw me reading. She said, "Are you using your school Latin to read that?" And I said, "Yes." She nodded because she'd been at the same sort of school as I had. So, you know, you never know when this stuff comes in, and knowing some Latin, okay, you don't have to be able to speak it fluently, but understanding what the language is all about is very, very useful for learning almost any other Latinate language. I didn't like French either at school. And it's funny because I did like German. It was the accent that threw me with the French. Okay, so instead of expecting high standards, they were indulging pupils from underprivileged backgrounds and thus unintentionally condemning them. Yeah, they were saying to the kids, well, you can't be expected to do too well, so I'm not going to expect you to do too well. And then the kid doesn't do too well because children follow adults. That's one of the problems or strengths, whichever way you like to look at it, with religion. You get kids growing up in a Christian household or a Muslim household, and they definitely have different attitudes to the world, and that's because of their religions, and that comes from their backgrounds, what their adults had told them. So if their adults tell them they're victims, they'll grow up feeling like victims. That's the difference with boys at Eton are told, well, you are going to, well, they used to be told anyway, you are going to administer the world, so you better shape up now. So most of them did. Some did crack under the strain. There are always going to be victims in education, always. There are always going to be kids that don't quite fit in. But that's going to happen whichever way round you do it. So what's going to happen is you're going to either produce mostly kids that can control themselves and therefore can control other people and develop an orderly way of dealing with the world. And then there are going to be some kids that simply can't handle that. And you have to give them support, but they will never quite fit that template. Or you will get mostly kids who are disorderly and chaotic, and then there will be some orderly ones who just simply by their very nature are a bit more orderly, and they're not going to fit in with the crowd. You just got to decide which one is going to give the most children the best chance in life. Okay, so why should these things be the preserve of the rich, she said. Not in the view of the Labour councillors who ran those deprived boroughs. Mostly, I suspect, because deep down those Labour councillors know if they have people who can think analytically, who are orderly, who can lift themselves up out of the victimhood of poverty and all the rest, they won't be voting for those Labour councillors anymore. This is not to the advantage of a Labour council spouting all sorts of stuff about, we'll lift you up, we're the only ones who can give you a chance. No. Being lifted up, being given a chance, you just need a level playing field, and the rest comes from in here, not from a Labour councillor. Anyway, they were not happy and they didn't help her. The last thing they wanted was a traditionalist school showing up its neighbours. That's another thing. If the school is really good from the same demographic, then all the other schools are going to have to shape up, and they don't like that either. You know, this is human nature. Hang on, I'm going to call. Oh, all right. The last thing they were, again and again, Birbalsingh was rebuffed before, in 2014, finally being allowed to take over an old office block by Wembley Park Tube. In these unpropitious surroundings, Sorry. She has pulled off what I can only call a secular miracle. The school was called the Michaela School. Many of Michaela's children come from estates poisoned by drugs and gangs. Perhaps 9 in 10 are from ethnic minorities with dozens of different home languages. 41% of her first intake were officially classed as disadvantaged, meaning they'd qualified for free school meals. Yet in 2019, that cohort, the first to sit GCSEs, secured some of the best grades in the country. 54% got 7, 8 or 9, which are the top grades, the equivalent to A or A star under the old system, as against a national average of 22%. 54% got 7, 8 or 9. The national average was 22%, and that includes, of course, private schools, which are supposed to give a better education. But even the teachers in the private schools have been corrupted by, these so-called child-friendly education systems. When you read those precepts on the page, they seem obvious. I suspect that even some lefty teachers feel a distant memory toiling upwards like the bell of a seed-round village. Ah, that's nicely written. A recollection of their own school days when they knew damn well who the best teachers were, but seeing them in action is properly awe-inspiring. All right, well, there's a whole article here. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It'll take too long. I'll leave a link to this article in the description. And I just want you to be aware of people like Catherine Birbalsingh. And whether you're here in the UK or in America where you're fighting school boards, I want you to just look at what she's done and remember them. Oh, I'm sorry, not forgetting Australia and New Zealand. I have subs there as well. But anywhere where they're being corrupted by this, let it all hang out type philosophy, no. Just read what Catherine Birbalsingh has done and try and bring that to your school district or your school board or the teachers in your parents, or the parents in your PTA or whatever. Just remember her. Why can't we be more like the Michaela School is the question you should be asking. And perhaps, bit by bit, we can push back against the corrupted teaching methods that have taken hold of our teaching philosophy recently. Well, within the past 20 years, I suppose. Okay, well, I'm Grannyopteryx, and to be found on YouTube, Rumble, BitChute and Minds. When I upload a video, I am at Grannyopteryx on Twitter, Gab and Parler, and I always let you know on those platforms. So if you sub to one of those, you'll always know when I put a new video up. YouTube sometimes tell subscribers when there's a new video, but sometimes they don't. And meanwhile, children, pay attention. Sit up straight. Hands on the desk. Listen. Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and t-shirts come in the Grannyopteryx design or Granbo with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.grannyopteryx.com and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share.